automatically muted, so please remember to unmute your microphone before speaking. If you have a question or comment during the meeting, please indicate that in the meeting chat function. Mariah, would you please call the roll?
Representative Baker?
Present.
Thank you. Representative Banta?
Here.
Thank you. Representative Bojanowski?
Present.
Thank you. Representative Decker?
Present.
Thank you. Representative Donahue?
Yes, ma'am. Present.
Thank you. Representative Dossett?
Present.
Thank you. Representative Hart?
Present.
Thank you. Representative Koenig?
Present in the room.
Thank you. Representative Lewis?
Present.
Thank you. Representative Massey?
Here.
Thank you. Representative McCool?
Here.
Thank you. Representative Miller? Here. Thank you. Representative Gibbons-Prunty?
Present in the room.
Thank you. Representative Rayburn? Representative Scott?
Present in my annex office.
Thank you. Representative Timoney?
Present.
Thank you. Representative Tipton?
Present in the room.
Thank you. Representative Weber?
Present in the room.
Thank you. Representative White?
Present in the room.
Thank you. Representative Wilner?
I'm present in my annex office.
Thank you. Co-Chair Huff, or I guess Chair Huff is not here. Vice Chair Riley.
Here. Thank you, Mariah. Here today, we all have a daunting task. I believe all of us on this committee care about children, their education, and the many people involved in their education. No one in this room right here is likely to agree 100% with the bill that we finalized this week. But I also believe that all of us will agree with some parts of this bill. If we were writing this, I think we would have 22. If we were writing this individually, I think we would have 22 different versions on this committee and 138 different versions in the General Assembly. But it's incumbent on us to pass this bill and do what we can to do things in the best interest of education in the state of Kentucky. So at this time, we will start with Representative Banta, who is going to present the bill. So Representative Banta, please introduce yourself. Make sure you have the microphone turned on and close to you.
Thank you, Chairman Riley. My name is Kim Banta, 63rd District, and I'm going to go over the section summaries, and then at the end I'll take any questions that you may have. Hb1, an act relating to the delivery of education and care for children declaring an emergency. Section 1, it nullifies the mandated child care masking regulation upon effective date of this act. It does not mean that a child care facility can enact its own masking mandate. It just gets rid of the mandated child care now. Section 2, it nullifies the Kentucky Board of Education's mandated masking Regulation 5, and this will be 5 working days from the time that this bill.
Representative Banta, I'm sorry, we need to make a motion on a sub. I think you got a sub. Got a motion on a sub, Representative Tipton. Second, Representative Lewis. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Sorry, Representative Banta.
It's all right.
Continue.
It's all right. Section 2 nullifies the Kentucky Board of Education's mandated masking. It'll take place 5 working days after this bill is enacted. Once again, it is local control. If boards wish to pass a masking mandate, they can. It's shouldn't be any different than the masking mandate that's been in place in terms of discipline or anything else. Section 3, local boards submit to KDE their publicly available COVID-19 school operations plan as of the effective date of this act. Does not mean you have to rewrite the whole thing. You just may have to tweak it due to some of the changes. Section 4, the Kentucky Department of Health shall develop a test-to-stay model for the districts as an alternative to quarantining. And the Kentucky Department of Health shall support local health districts in providing assistance to local school districts for implementing their board-approved COVID-19 plans. Section 5, through December 31st, 2021, due to COVID-19 absences, remote instruction may be temporarily provided to a particular grade, school, classroom, or group for no more than an overall of 20 days per district. Section 6, for SEEK funding, the 2022-23 allows districts to use either 2018-19 or 2019-20 data pursuant to the 2020 Senate Bill 177 in lieu of using school district attendance for 21-22, and attendance growth will be addressed during the 22 session. Section 7, certified staff must perform work duties on site during COVID-related NTI days or remote instruction days under Section 5 unless quarantined. Districts may decide on other staff. Section 8, temporary waivers for utilizing certified, classified, emergency, and substitute staff. Background checks, superintendents employ all individuals on probationary status after receiving background approval from the KYAOC while pending receipt of the Kentucky State Police background checks. Section 9, retired certified staff allow teachers already retired as of August 1st, 2021, who have completed a minimum requirement break in employment to teach in the Kentucky Public School and receive their retirement and their salary, but they will be also paying into TRS. Section 11 is the same as, and that should be the sub that you received. Section 10 is the same for Section 9 for retired classified staff. Section 11 allows school districts to waive the 170 instructional days and utilize the equivalent of 1,062 hours to accomplish makeup days under certain conditions, and that gives somewhere around 8 to 10 extra days of flexibility. In Section 13, it would be declared an emergency.
I'm sorry, we need to stand at ease. So it allows full salary. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. For these, and this is exactly it. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Chairman. Okay, go ahead and proceed, Representative Banna.
Thank you. For those of us that are educators, remember when Kara first started and we were building the plane as we were flying it? I'm feeling that right now. Okay, Section 7 was removed, which allowed schools to incentivize vaccines, and it's because we found out that they already have the ability to do that, so that if they so choose. And then it also deletes existing language in Section 10 and cuts the 90-day separation requirement to 30 days for retired teachers to return to the classroom. And it increases the critical shortage program for in TRS from 1% to 10% and allows the school districts increased actuarial costs to be paid with federal funds, ESSER funds. And teachers are allowed to come back at their full pay and receive their retirement. And at this time, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Representative Bannon. I'm sure we'll have several questions. So the first, Representative Bojanowski.
Yes, and first of all, I'd like to thank Rep. Banta because every question that I've had that I've presented to her, we have discussed, and in addition to the chair of the committee. So I'm very grateful for that. As a teacher, in preparation for last Wednesday's meeting on education, thinking about what our concerns are, there were three very important topics to the educators who responded to me. One was maintaining mandatory masking, and some thoughts on that not happening right now. We need to think about the impact that will have on substitute teachers, because it's quite likely that substitute teachers will not pick up jobs in districts where they no longer have mandatory masking. So I encourage districts as they make their decisions to think about that fact. The second major concern for educators was how they have to use their sick days when they're placed in quarantine or if they actually have COVID. So, for example, the Department of Education has a regulation that says if you are vaccinated and you are placed in quarantine by your district, that the district will pay and you do not have to use your sick days. So we as teachers, we get 10 sick days a year. If you're a fairly new teacher or if you're within childbearing ages, because we don't get maternity leave, you can burn through your sick days very quickly. So if you live in Warren County, where the county board doesn't have a policy, if you are unvaccinated and placed in quarantine, or if you test positive for COVID, you would then have to use your own sick days. And when you run out of sick days, you would have to go on FMLA leave, and you would have unpaid days. So sick days are something that's very important to the teachers. And the third one that came up again and again was flexibility in NTI. And I'm very appreciative that the remote instruction aspect of this bill does offer schools flexibility, districts, to have a closure or to have students attend remote instruction either at the classroom level, at a grade level. You could do a building. But there are some questions, and my question for you, Rep. Banta, is could you explain the difference between remote instruction and NTI?
NTI is non-traditional instruction, so that could be worksheets, it could be a myriad of things that the school has. Remote instruction is on the computer, teacher in the classroom giving the syllabus.
Okay, and may I ask one more?
Yes, ma'am.
More of a statement. So my concern is that our remote instruction levels, which we have 20 days per district, will look very different in how targeted a district can be in a district such as Anchorage, which has one school building. In Anchorage, they would have 20 days that they could target specific groups of students for remote instruction to mitigate COVID. However, in a district such as Jefferson County Public Schools with 155 buildings, they could target a third grade class in Watterson Elementary School, and that would count as 1 day for the entire district. So a large district does not have the same flexibility that a smaller district would have, and that is my major concern about the remote instruction aspect of the bill. Do you have any other thoughts on the limit to 20 days?
I just for fun would like to consider 20 days per building. But
Well, if you consider that for fun, I do have an amendment that could address that. So we would have a lot of fun doing that.
We
But-
would have fun.
But I just, our educators, our teachers, we want our children safe. We want our educators to be safe. And while I agree with local control could make all of these decisions already, with the exception of the NTI flexibility. And the reason teachers are concerned is because they are not confident that their local boards will make those decisions. So I think, there's a lot of money that has come down to districts, and I think supporting our teachers as they have to take leave due to COVID could be a very high priority that I would advocate for. Thank you very much.
thank you.
And I'd like to mention also that another thing that's being done to increase flexibility is that we've switched from the number of days to the number of hours. So now you have to have 1,062 hours as opposed to 170 days. If my math is any good, and I'll check with my elementary math teachers sometime, that's 150 days times 7 hours is 1,050 hours, which would leave you 12 short. So schools can make up those hours after school. I mean, they can extend the day at the end of the day, in front of the day. So there's going to be some flexibility for probably up to 20 days in that regard, as far as schools trying to work out through these difficult situations.
If I may make a comment on that?
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Riley. Okay, so yes, I'm very appreciative for that. In our district, students go to school 6.66 hours a day, and we would have approximately 10 days left when we have met the hour requirement. My concern about that is that it is not a targeted strategy that would then keep the most kids that we could in school. It would only apply if the entire district were closed.
Okay, thank you for that information.
Thank you.
Okay, Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Banta, could you please explain to me why this allows districts to substitute the annual attendance from previous years in Section 6?
Yeah, so we're trying to hold harmless for a lot of attendance. We're trying to keep schools open. It's not beneficial for a superintendent to keep a school district open if he's at 60% attendance. If we hold them harmless, schools can stay open for children that are well and can continue their education, and the schools don't have to lose financially because of that.
A brief comment, please. In my district, a number of places around the state, people have chosen to pull their kids out of school. Primarily because of the mask mandate, and this isn't the fault of the superintendent. It's not the fault of the school board. This was mandated by Andy Bashir and the Kentucky Board of Education. But parents have taken on the responsibility of educating their children. They are bearing that financial burden. Some of them have sent their kids to private school, and to continue to send that money to the public school for no other reason than just to make sure that they're sustainable into the long term doesn't make sense to me. Because this was obviously a statement made by the parents who chose to do otherwise for their kids. So I'm concerned about that part myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Baker. Representative Donahue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My issue is about Section 1 and also Section 4 about the mask mandates. If I may, in my previous employment, I was part of a leadership team, and we had to make decisions every day to protect the safety of the employees that worked there or protect the safety of the students. And so by raising our hands, taking those positions, that we took on that responsibility. And so for the test to stay, I think the mask mandate removal is a mistake, my personal opinion, because you have to have a baseline if you're going to start somewhere to try to defeat this epidemic. We got to have a baseline. And so why in the world people won't get vaccinated? We're a generation of folks that have been vaccinated in this room. Everybody in this room has been vaccinated for some reason, whatever it may be. And so for some reason we have got this inclination that we don't need to do that anymore. And it's a sad state of the union to be that way. My issue is this: when we talk about that, the test to stay, Have you all figured out how much money? I've got a guesstimation or an estimation. It would be like $66 million a week to implement throughout the state of Kentucky for a test to stay. Now, for a test to stay to work, you have to mask kids. So, in my previous employment in a leadership team, I didn't want to make that phone call home that I didn't do what I needed to do. We always erred on the side of safety. So I want kids back in school like everybody else does as well, too. I think it's critical. But kids represent a lot of times what adults do. You know, my grandchildren, God bless them, just like anybody else's, that I explained to them that, you know, we, and along with their parents, that we have to wear a mask and stuff for us to, not only for ourselves, but to protect their fellow students or classmate or friend, for us to be successful in the future. And why we don't do that, I don't understand that. You know, I'll do anything I can to help to make sure the safety of children and also to get back to the normalcy of going back to school. And so those are two non-starters for me right there, and there's several more. But I would just wish that we would put down our swords and axes or whatever it may be, or our political affiliations, and let's take a look at making good common sense measures here for us to be successful. Because if you have a solid baseline and people all get vaccinated, we'll do that, or our students or our teachers or our bus drivers, and it's come across the nation. What we'll do is then we address whatever the variance may be from us starting from a foundation area that's going to make us successful in the future. So both of those two things are non-starters. I appreciate you trying to come to some kind of conclusion where we be successful in the future. I really do. But these are non-starters for me. So I think the mask mandate removal is a mistake. I think we, as leaders, should make that decision, take it off those school board folks. I understand the local control, but a lot of times people are influenced. You ever notice you went to anytime you're a political thing, you're out raising and you're talking and you're having a meeting or something like that, people that are against you are normally the ones that show up. It's not the ones that are for you. It's the ones that are against you. And so a lot of times confrontation, folks, is a tool. So a lot of time they go to these school boards and they have this confrontation. It's awful tough for those school board members. I understand they raised their hand as well, too, because they're trying to do the right thing to move forward in a progressive way. We, as leadership, should make those decisions for a state for us to be successful in the future. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Donahue. Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you. I do want to add to the conversation around non-traditional instruction days. I've been asked by people in District 41 to speak up for the need to have options to shift to at least temporary remote instruction, the flexibility to shift to hybrid instructional models. So people are very interested in that. And yes, there's a lot of concern around the universal masking in public schools. People in the district that I represent, because we are disproportionately impacted by COVID-19, definitely want us to maintain universal masking in our public schools until we hear otherwise from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. So Representative Banta, can you explain a little bit more for me what this bill does around masking? Does it eliminate mask mandates in our public schools altogether, or does it provide for some kind of flexibility in keeping our kids, our staff, and our families safe?
It absolutely does not mandate that you cannot mask. That is one of the things that actually some people have asked for that. They want no mandates and a mandate to say you can't have the mandate. That was one thing that was brought up, but it is not. A school board may absolutely choose to mask and stay masked until for as long as they're in the red, or as long as whatever criteria them and their health department feel that they should go by.
Thank you, Representative.
Thank you, Representative Scott. Representative Wilner.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Rep. Banta, for the presentation and for your work on the bill. I have questions. I think there's a lot of consensus I'm hearing around the need for additional flexibility at the local level and for us to be able to make targeted. Can you hear me?
I'm sorry, you kept cutting out.
Oh dear. Okay. Well,
that's okay. You sound good now.
Okay, very good. I said, I think I'm hearing some consensus around flexibility at the local level and for school boards, for school districts to be able to make targeted decisions. And we heard last week from the superintendents really wanting as many tools in the tool belt as we're willing to give them. And I wanted to follow up on this idea of hybrid instruction. It feels so important to give schools that additional tool, that additional flexibility. The hybrid model really is the most practical option to assure that our schools can stay open and that they're having in-person contact with students in a safe way. With the hybrid, the learning doesn't need to be interrupted for quarantining because they're already having the remote and the in-person going on. It allows time for deep cleaning and sanitization of the classrooms, which is really important to the folks in my district I'm hearing from. It allows opportunities for social distancing. And maybe most important, it gives students and families and teachers a predictable schedule. It's the unpredictability of the closing and the opening, and we're not sure, and we say we're going to stay open, but then kids get sick or teachers get sick and we have to close. The hybrid really gives that predictability, which is so good for our mental health and our sense of stability and control and all of this. I'm wondering what your sense is of there being willingness to take up an amendment that would allow school districts to have this hybrid option in place. And I will say that I have filed such an amendment, and I'm hoping that we could take that up.
I would say that probably isn't going to get very far because people are very concerned by the fact that half the kids are there. It's off and on. Half their education is spent with remote learning. The emphasis of this bill was truly to get kids in the classroom with the teacher, which is the most important person in that building that they are in contact with daily.
If I could just respond to that.
Sure.
Thank you. And it's a great response. And I also understand to have kids in person when we can do it safely. One of the concerns that I'm hearing from my district is that it's not being reported, but that there's a good deal of truancy of parents who are simply saying, my child is not going to school, or my child will go to school on the days when I know that I can get them transportation and they don't have to ride on a bus where social distancing is not possible. And so I definitely agree with kids need to be in school. That's the best place that they can be when it's safe for them. But I think we're losing a lot of kids being in school because we're not allowing that option. And I hear you saying that's likely not going to go anywhere, but if there's an opportunity to continue that conversation about hybrid options, I would love for us to be able to do that.
I could talk about education 24/7, 365, but with the parents that are just disappearing, remote, if family chooses in districts, I have been told that they are allowed to remain remote. So I don't know why you would just disappear, or it just doesn't, that doesn't sound like a very good way to address your child's education. But yes, Representative Woolner, we can talk.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Wilner. Representative Massey.
Thank you, and I appreciate the work that's been done on this. And I need to say a couple of things to put it in context. First of all, before becoming a legislator, I served on the Boone County School Board for 22 years. And I also had the opportunity to serve as president of the KSBA and the National School Boards Association. And for those 22 years, I fought day and night for local control. And we have given them local control now. And I applaud that. I applaud this body for doing that. Now, I will say this, as Frankfurt participants here, as legislators and senators, we're not in the great position to know what's going on in each individual district. All districts are individual. All districts have different circumstances that arise, different constituencies, different makeup, and so we have to take that into consideration. This will allow those districts to make educated, informed decisions at the local level by their elected officials, which, if you didn't know, school board members make up the largest contingency of elected officials in Kentucky, because there's I think 172 districts now. All of them have at least 5 members. A couple have, at least Jefferson County, I think, has 7. So there are a large group of elected officials that have the ability to make these difficult decisions. Now, I understand that it puts some burden on them to have to make those decisions that are not always politically popular, that they have to decide whether they want to require masks in their district. One thing that I've suggested, and I've spoken to it with a couple of representatives, is some kind of metrics that would say, basically, if you have a quarantine rate of X or you have a absence rate of X, then this metric will apply and that will trigger the use of mask or whatever. Again, I'm not for mandates either of mask or vaccines. I'm not against masks, I'm not against vaccines, but I'm not for the mandates that are so often quick to be delivered by people that are not on the ground in the trenches doing the day-to-day work. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I think we need to remember that all this NTI discussion and remote learning, this is going to be a temporary fix right now because we're in a special session. This will be dealt with again when we come into session in January. So if there is a problem, if things get worse or better, we have the ability and we have the authority as legislators to bring that back before this body and address that at that time. So this is not an ends-all situation. This is a situation where we are trying to make a fix right now to keep the children in school, if at all possible. We all know that in-school learning is by far better than remote learning. With regards to the filling of the vacancies, part of the issue is finding subs. I know school districts that say, I've got 1 sub for this school, and that's all I have. And so we're trying to incentivize people to come in and help us with those circumstances. Now, that's still problematic, because if you have somebody that comes in and they meet the requirements, they have 64 hours of college education, or they meet the other requirements that's set forth in the bill, I think in Section 8, then they can be in the classroom. That does not replace a qualified teacher in the classroom. So it basically fills a void temporarily for a moment, but it is no fix to get and deliver an appropriate, free and appropriate public education. And so we have to take that into consideration as well. So I think that in the short time that we've had, based on the Supreme Court decision, which prompted this special session, in the short time we've had with varying opinions, as Chairman Riley said, we've done the best we can with what we have, and we're working through this problem. I do agree with comments that we need to exercise more civility and put away the politics from a health crisis. You know, I can't tell you how many emails that I've gotten from people that basically say that we're not standing up for liberty, we're not taking care of business. And the fact of the matter is, this is a complex problem that involves health, safety of our children. In fact, this morning, my unvaccinated uncle, I got a call that he was in surgery because his lungs collapsed from COVID, and they're putting him on a ventilator. And, you know, that is a burden to me. Now, whether it's a mandate or not, I wish he had had the vaccine, because what is he going to be able to say to his children? Well, if he doesn't survive, he wouldn't be able to say anything. And so I think that we need to try to protect our teachers, protect our students, but yet still provide the best delivery of education that we can. And some of the nonsense that we've had to deal with in the last few days of people jockeying for position or whatever it may be, that needs to be set aside so that we can get down to the business of what's important. The biggest employer in our state is our schools, if you combine all of them. And so we need to make sure that they're protected, but we need to let those school districts in their local communities decide what is best for them in their local communities, and then we can try to provide them the support and the energy that they need to do that. That's why we're doing the NTI and remote learning days. They've asked for those. I will say in my closing is that I did speak with Jim Flynn this morning from KASS, and he indicated they would like to have the 20 days for each building as well. And I understand that, you know, and I'm not necessarily in opposition to that if that's going to be an amendment. But the issue is, where do we end with the flexibility, or where does it start, or where does it end? And I know that we can come back in January. And I just need to think that people need to sit back and take a deep breath and understand, right now we're trying to do a temporary fix to what could be a very long-term problem. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, and I'd also like to add that it is September 9th, and we are coming up on Turkey Day, and we're coming up on Christmas. So think of those long breaks with the additional days that have been added.
Thank you, Representative Massey. Representative Gibbons-Prunty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Banta, for your work on this. I have a couple questions. One's pretty quick. In Section 6, parentheses 1, do the school systems get to choose which year of attendance that they use for their figures?
Yes.
Okay. And then the second one, I've been in contact with my public health department directors locally, and they have asked for some amendments. I'm just going to tell you what they are, and then we'll kind of go from there. Section 4, number 3. It says the local health department shall provide assistance. I've been told that schools can choose where they get their tests to stay, and that tests are in short supply, and that needs to be an option, not a mandate, so to speak. And then Section 9, number 1. Let's see. They've asked that public health workers be allowed to return from retirement because they're having the same staffing issues with shortages, trying to provide all these services. So if you would entertain potentially those amendments.
I actually, the one amendment, I have spoken to a representative, and I said that I would consider that a friendly amendment.
And just one more thing.
Yes.
They also said that extracurricular activities and sports need to be excluded because that's where a lot of the spreading is happening. So
Excluded, what do you mean?
I need to clarify that with her, but she from the test to stay, I believe. But I'll clarify that and get with you on the side. Okay. Thank you,
good.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Gibbons-Prunty. Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, we got a lot going on now. I've been in schools for all my life. Assistant principal, coach, principal. I've seen a lot of kids go and come. In fact, one of the things that really bothers me, we have children. In fact, I have 5 grandchildren in middle and elementary. But what bothers me more than anything is the 11-year-olds and under, they have no protection, none whatsoever. Now, my 12-year-old and 13-year-old, they have their shots. And, of course, we all believe, I hope that we start believing more in vaccinations. That's what will solve some of our problems. But when we put all these kids on buses with no mask on whatsoever, breathing on one another, at least the mask from the CDC and all, they say that it does help and helps prevent it, along with the vaccinations. So I think I just want to make this point. I could make several other points, but I just want to say with the 11-year-old, I had one that's already been in quarantine, but luckily he was tested, so on and so forth, got back in school and what have you. But Jefferson County is going to have a hard time with a lot of our schools, and I think the amendment is definitely necessary for the larger school systems. A lot of things in this bill that are good. I think everybody's really trying to do the right thing, Representative Rowley. I know you are, and I know you care, because you and I believe a lot alike. But we want to protect our kids. We want to protect our teachers. But you know what? They go home to their parents and grandparents. So let's think about what can happen. we're beginning to lose 15-year-olds to COVID, and we didn't think that would ever happen. And people that believe that it won't happen to them, it definitely can. This is really a serious time of the year. We need to keep our kids in school if we can, but we need to think about what spreads the COVID. And if you have a mask, at least you've got to change. So we talk about mandates, we talk about a lot, but I know a lot of our board members, they're getting a lot of pressure put on them. They're getting a lot of threats. And that's maybe the minority of people, but they can't do their jobs. So I just want to point that out, and I hope that they come up with something for these 11 and under. I read somewhere where they said maybe the last of September. But we need to all remember vaccinations is the secret to solving this problem. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Miller. Representative Tipton?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a brief question, then I'd like to make some comments. Representative Banta, if I could get some clarification on the portion of the bill that deals with the waiver that allows retired teachers and retired classifieds to come back to work shorter than they normally would be. Will they be paying into a second retirement account, or will they strictly be working for their pay in that situation plus getting their retirement?
The way it was presented, the way I understand it, is that they can come back after 30 days, which we've passed the 30 days if you retired back in June. They can come back. They will come back at their full pay. They will get their full TRS. That does not affect that. And they will not pay into retirement.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that position.
And just to until January 15th.
I knew this was temporary, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I do have a few comments.
Yes, sir.
2 years ago, none of us ever imagined we'd be in this situation right now. We were living our lives, doing the things that we do on our daily basis. The kids were going to school. 2 years ago, we were probably in the middle of a governor's race here in Kentucky. But times have changed. The situations have changed. The last year and a half has been extremely difficult on all of our citizens, not only here in Kentucky, but across the nation, across the world. People are tired. They're frustrated. They're looking for answers. And I don't know that there is a perfect answer out there. I made a comment in a previous session about pensions that I believe will continue. We won't have a perfect pension fix. We'll continually have to manage our pension situation. And I foresee the same thing with the COVID issue. I truly do not believe COVID will ever disappear entirely. It's an issue we're going to continue to have to manage. We're going to have to learn how to adjust our lives, learn how to live. And in this special session, as it's just been mentioned, in a short period of time, we're trying to put some temporary things in place to help our schools manage. And I'd like to address a few of those. I think a lot of times people get confused about terms. They interchange terms. Schools do have the ability to offer virtual academies for 6th grade and up. They can apply for a waiver for the grades below that, and many of the districts have. Now, those virtual academies are meant for students who they're intended for students, hopefully, to be there for the whole year. They don't want students coming in and out. And there are students who actually thrive in type of environment, so that's out there. Each school district is allotted 10 days of non-traditional instruction. I know there were several school districts that did not even participate in NTI before the COVID situation came up. So this is new for a lot of school districts. I have 3 school superintendents that I represent in my district. I talk to them on a regular basis, and the one thing that they have emphasized to me is they need tools so they can provide flexibility in being able to manage their buildings and keep their children safe and keep them in the classroom. Is this a perfect bill? No, but it does provide them many tools, the 20 days of remote learning, the removal of the 170 days of instruction, allowing them to go to hours of instruction as well. I think it's critical to understand the funding mechanism. Representative Baker asked a question on that. He has a valid concern. If we continue to go back, there are many districts who have lost enrollment over the years. There are districts that have seen growth, and as you mentioned in your presentation, we need to address those issues as we go forward into the 22 regular session. But for the time being, I do believe we need to give these school districts the flexibility, because I've talked to superintendents and they have the same concern you mentioned. If my attendance gets down to a certain level, I'm really, because they have to think about their funding for next year. If you don't understand their average daily attendance impacts how they're funded in the next fiscal year. So that's an additional tool. It's been mentioned we'll be back in January, and I think probably the masking situation has probably been the most contentious of this. I hear from constituents on both sides of this. I understand. I try and be respectful. I try and listen to people. Here's the situation we're in. We've got a bill that can do some good. You may not like everything in this bill, but if this bill does not pass, none of these things are going to be out there for these schools to participate in to provide them that flexibility. As I want to be supporting this legislation, if we have amendments, I want us to I want to listen, I want to consider them, but we're going to have to put some faith and trust, as the bill is written now, in our local school boards and superintendents to make the right decisions for the community. I think that's a much better option and give them those flexibility and those tools than not passing anything. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Tipton. And I would like to clarify one thing. On the retired teachers coming back, they will pay into retirement. It looks like there's a program where that cost can be funded with federal dollars because it is a qualified expense, and this gives the schools flexibility. So I think everybody needs to know that, and I'm not sure that the presenter was aware of that, but yes, they do have to pay into retirement. It's my understanding they don't receive any extra retirement, but they do have to pay in retirement from when they come back.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
Gave a TRS a heart attack.
Like you said it earlier, you're flying by the seat of your pants. So, Representative Timoney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative, thank you for bringing this bill. This bill deals a lot with the work that I do on a daily basis. You know, I've been an elementary assistant principal, I've been a middle school assistant principal, I've been a high school teacher. Now I work at a district level position where I deal with logistics. The critical shortages in the schools, I see every single day when I pull into my workplace, every single day. I see the shortage of bus drivers. I see the shortage of food service workers. I see the shortage of substitute teachers. I see the conditions of the way schools are right now. One of the things that I think that we need to definitely identify is that when we passed a lot of the legislation we did during the spring, we really set the table for the school districts and how they were going to roll into the school year. And the school districts didn't blink, because that's how schools work. Mm-hmm. Superintendents, teachers, principals, give them a problem, they'll find a way to make it work. They did everything we asked. We're called into a special session, and now we have an opportunity to bring them assistance, a lifeline, adjust our sails. I was having a conversation with a principal recently, and I said, so how are things going? And the immediate response, fine. No, tell me, how are they going? How are things doing? He said, well, I need you to tell you a story of a teacher. He said, you can't tell anybody who I am or where this is coming from, because this is pretty significant. And I said, go ahead. And I know I'm publicly announcing this, but it is what it is. I think it's important to hear this. He said a custodian came to his office and said, you need to check in with Miss Jones. And he said, what's going on with Miss Jones? Something's wrong. He said, well, what's going on? It was a Monday morning. He's just like, oh, goodness, what am I dealing with today? So he went to Miss Jones's classroom. And when he went in, he started crying. She had built a wall of plexiglass behind her desk and had an air purifier and the windows open. She was wearing 3 masks and a face guard. Why? Because she was scared to call for a substitute. She had her windows open. She had created a safe place where she could, after having tested positive for COVID, she was so worried about the quality of the instruction and her kids and the burden she was going to put on her school because there was no one else to come and do her job for her. She was willing to make that sacrifice, and she wasn't feeling well. He obviously appropriately dealt with the situation, and it was before students had gotten to the school for that day. But that's one story of countless of what our teachers are doing every single day, and our superintendents and our principals. We are at war right now with COVID, not with each other. Our enemy is COVID, and we're being distracted by things. We have tools in place. No one knows how this is going to play out. The representative before me, he said it so eloquently. We don't know where we're going with this. We don't know where we're going to end up. 5 years from now, what are we going to be talking about? Are we going to talk about another session where we're dealing with COVID? I hope not. I pray that we don't. But where we are right now, we have an opportunity to extend help. This is not an easy bill, and I respect the heck out of you for doing this. You know, the parts that I worked on, the parts that I supported, I stand behind. There were some things that I have to get over before I can truly get behind this. First, the positives. It is very responsive. It is responsive. There are 3 main factors for what we're dealing with. We're dealing with safety of students and staff. We're dealing with adults as far as getting qualified people in our buildings. And we're dealing with quality instruction. And that last part, we're willing to push to the side just to get through. And I don't think we should be doing that. As long as we're still mandating state tests, that facet is still going to be part of that. So as long as we're still doing that, quality instruction has got to be there. Does this bill address safety of students and staff? It does to a degree. If I'm going to vote yes to remove the state mandate from KDE, the mask mandate, I'm basically saying that I trust the entire state of Kentucky to do what's right regarding masks and COVID. If there's no matrix like what was put in place, because I was under the impression that there was going to be a matrix involved, and it needs to be in here. Because that's going to provide the cover that our districts are going to need in order to do what's right for our kids. I think that that's really, really important for that. The 20 days of virtual instruction, it definitely benefits your smaller school districts. You definitely have that opportunity. I like to use analogies a lot. School districts are like boats. Your smaller school districts are like speedboats. Easy to navigate, quick to turn. You can make quick adjustments and have immediate impact. Your larger districts are like your houseboats. It takes a long time. If you need to turn quickly, you're out of luck. That flexibility really helps those speedboats. It doesn't really help the larger districts. I mean, if you look what 20 days is going to do for Jefferson County or even for Fayette County Public Schools, it does provide some relief. And the spirit of that idea is incredible because what it does is it entrusts our superintendents to make the right academic calls for their buildings. That's what we want, and we all agree on that. That's the ultimate of local control. But what it does is it stops short with your larger districts, so there's a limit there. The test to stay piece, I think there's a lot of validity behind that. One of the members of the Let Them Learn group reached out to me and said, hey, this is something, there's a lot of validity behind this. Take a look at it. He sent me some important research on it, and I read into it. Back to the quality instruction piece. No one really ever knows what the numbers are, but under 10% of students that are in quarantine test positive. Is that a risk we're going to take? So far, it's what we're doing. I'm comfortable with that. But what about the loss of instruction for that 90%? Like, how can we make sure that we're closing that gap? How can we make sure? Is that a virtual option? Is that something else? Anyway, if we're going to roll that out, if we're going to encourage this as a body, we cannot push a plan that fails. How many test kits are there available in the state of Kentucky? If we roll this out and school districts are all on board with test and stay, and then we don't have enough rapid tests to complete the plan, then we failed. And I'm not in the, like, I will fail in a lot of ways, but this is not something, this is health. This is what we're talking about. It's our students, it's our staff. We can't fail there. ADA funding relief, thank you. That's what everybody's asked for. That's what we need to do. We need to provide that for the districts. So the districts that are trying really hard to keep their kids in place, but have to close because there aren't enough bus drivers or food service workers, that provides them the relief. It shores up the loose ends with leave time. It does remove some of the administrative obstacles to help ensure dealing with our critical shortages. So that's very important. There's some other things, on a logistics level, like, for example, I know we have some state regulations that deal with bus drivers needing to have their CDL. In order to have the CDL, they have to have a GED in order to get the CDL. That's something that we need to take a look at. If we need to put something in place where we're going to waive that for a temporary period of time to make sure we've got the school, the kids getting to school on the buses. The district I work in, we're 40 short. We've got 30 in the pipeline ready to be trained and to get out there, but right now we've got teachers and principals driving school buses. And if they asked me to do that, every mailbox in Fayette County should be scared, because that would be a big mistake. Go ahead and make sure that I
Representative, if
don't
I could chime in just very quickly, just
ma'am.
one little point. Senator Wise is checking into waiving the GED or equivalent for that exact reason. So I wanted you to know that is being investigated.
Sure. Well, in summary, there are a lot of very positive things in this bill. There are some things that I have got to get the insurance with the matrix for the mask wearing. That's a non-negotiable for me in that one, because conscious-wise, if I don't ensure that's putting that in place, it's almost as if I'm admitting that COVID is not a significant issue, and I can't do that.
Do you think that the medical professionals should be weighing in on that matrix? Like, I wouldn't be
Most
comfortable.
definitely.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. And that's how we have a very very collegial relationship with the health departments in Fayette County, and they come and they've been very attentive. They come to our meetings. They address those things. That would be something that would be very easily worked on and addressed. But those are some things. I can't. This is really tough, and it's so critical we get this right. Now, I will say one of the best things about it is that it does carry through until January 15th. So we will have the opportunity to come in January 15th and adjust our sails again. I don't know what the deal is with the nautical analogies for me today, but we are, that does provide us a lot of relief there. And thank you for the work that you did on this. I think that we're definitely in the right direction with it, but there's some things that we have got to address. And for me, it's the masks. Thank you.
All right, Representative Timmy, Representative Gibbons, Prunty, if you could go real short, we need to vote.
I was just going to comment. In talking to my local health department directors, they've said that they would. We've had this conversation at the local level for a matrix, and they said they'll always follow the CDC guidelines. So I think consulting with them and getting them into the mix would be good.
Thank you very much. And one thing I want to emphasize, I don't know if this is brought up, but regardless of what we do as far as max mandates or any school district does, it is a federal mandate that they are worn on buses. So I think everybody needs to understand that. It's a federal mandate that you have to wear a mask on a school bus. And at this time, it looks like we need a motion to adopt House Bill 1 as amended by proposed House Substitute 1.
Motion on the bill.
Got a motion on the bill from Representative Massey. Second. Second by Representative Tipton. Mariah, please call the roll.
Representative Baker?
No.
Representative Banta?
Yes.
Representative Bojanowski?
Yes, I'd like to briefly explain my vote.
Yes.
I'm going to pass today. I agree with Rep. Timoney about the need for a matrix regarding the masking issue. I also am very optimistic that we can look at a way that we can ensure that our larger districts can use the targeted flexibility of remote instruction in a better manner than just having the 20 days for 100,000 students. So I pass. Thank you.
Representative Decker?
No.
Representative Donahue?
Unfortunately, no.
Representative Dossett?
Yes.
Representative Hart?
Yes.
Representative Koenig? Yes. Representative Lewis?
Yes.
Representative Massey,
Yes.
Representative McCool,
Yes.
Representative Miller,
No.
Representative Gibbons Prunty,
Yes.
Representative Rayburn,
No.
Representative Riley,
Yes.
Representative Scott,
If I could explain my vote. I just want folks in Jefferson County who've been reaching out to me, parents, staff, and students, to know that I've heard you about at least having a shift to a hybrid instructional model. I've also heard you around the mask mandates, particularly as we think about the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on many of the people that I serve in District 41, the company health disparities in this public health crisis. And so for all of you, I am going to vote no on this bill. Thank you.
Representative Timoney,
Explain my vote. I'm going to pass until we get some closure on the matrix.
Representative Tipton, Representative Weber, Representative White, Representative Wilner,
No.
Chair Huff.
Then what does it count? Okay. All right, it looks like at this time the vote fails, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it.
Motion to adjourn.